Sanibonani, sanamgela kuhlelo, initiating insight with Sibongile. Today we'll be speaking about disability, trying to understand and learn a lot of dynamics around what we call disability. And to do that, we are joined by Ms. Khanyisile Matebula, who will tackle this topic further. Sabona, ma'am, welcome.
Sanibonani, and ngiyajabula ukubalana namhlanje.
Tell us, what is a definition of disability?
Actually, I just want to indicate that at the moment, akuna definition that is actually accepted in the country. However, I can indicate that disability, the way si understand ngakhona, sibuka disability than the ability, because really there is nothing wrong with people with disabilities. It's the environment that make them, disabled. For instance, you will find that they can't be able to access some of the buildings. If they need to go somewhere in a public building, it becomes a challenge. Then people will then think, there's something wrong with people with disabilities. But it's the environment itself, and you would find that in most instances, they are not like integrated in their own families and in communities. People tend to discriminate and, not even to think about them in their own families. And at times, it goes to the extent that they are abused, they are neglected, and so on. So there's actually nothing wrong with disability. It's the environment itself that we need to fix for people with disabilities to be accepted and integrated.
So the challenge you're posing, Ms. Khanyi, about the fact that there's nothing called disability, then perhaps we should change the wording itself.
Yes, actually what we use in most instances is they are differently abled people. Because you would find that even myself, some of the things, I had a colleague who was very good with, typing with IT, but the colleague was blind, partially blind. But she was really faster than me, which shows that they have different abilities than us actually looking at the disabilities.
So they're differently abled.
Differently abled.
So then that means
most of us, you would find that I might be disabled, but it's hidden. All of us in one way or the other, we are to some extent disabled.
So ngingithanda ukuthi Siskhanyi, when I go in that mode of mine, bese ngithi sonke siney'gulo zethu. Yabo, so perhaps all of us as human beings were differently abled, then we should say it like that, then, eh?
True, because abaningi bethu angithi sifaka ama-4 eyes. The glasses, it's part of disability.
Okay.
Because it means that, like me now, when I have to use the computer, I have to use the glasses. So to some extent, I'm also disabled, It's just that bona maybe sibabona be different from us, but we are all to some extent disabled.
Please tell us a little bit about your involvement in this program. Differently abled persons.
I really like that word, differently abled persons. I've indicated that there is still a challenge in our own families, our own communities, our own society, the way we treat, people with disabilities. And as a Department of Social Development, we conduct, education and awareness campaigns to educate communities, to educate families how to take care of people with disabilities, but mainly how to ensure that they are mainstreamed or integrated in families and in community programs. And also when it comes to, for example, building, there's a church that I visited here in Soweto. I was so impressed when you come in order for that church to ensure that people with disabilities are part of the church, there is a ramp. When they get in there, they go into that building with that ramp, those that are on wheelchairs. And mind you, disability is not about physical disability. There's people with albinism, autism, the people who are deaf, the people who are blind, you know. So we conduct awareness campaigns to educate communities about the needs of different people with disabilities, but we are not doing it alone. We are doing it with the NPOs, because there are various NPOs that specialize in different types, you know, of disabilities. As a department, we also do capacity building. We are a department that promotes the integration of people with disabilities in families, be it in families or in communities. So we have policies that guide, you know, our services as to how to provide, you know, programs to people with disabilities. And I want to emphasize the fact that we do not work alone. There's a slogan for people with disabilities: nothing about us without us. So whatever we plan, even if we develop policies, whatever we do it together with them. If that policy is developed, we make sure that from the planning stage, they are part and parcel of the development of that policy. We also provide armor protective workshops. Currently, we are in the process of reviewing the policy on protective workshops. It's supposed to cater for people who cannot be in the public work employment space. So they go there, they are involved in various activities, including income generation, and some of them are being kept, you know, busy, you know, during the day, doing something therapeutic and so on. Because we find that if they are sitting at home and not doing anything, they are also, you know, like left out, you know, discriminated. So we provide as a department, again, in partnership with NPOs, which is the non-profit, you know, organizations. We also have those, you know, where you find families really cannot take care of them. You know, we have residential facilities in the province. We are funding, as the Department of Social Development, about 30 of those facilities. They cater for people who really need care 24 hours, people with intellectual disabilities, people where the family really cannot really take care of them, because we can't leave them to be stranded on the street without being taken care of. So okay, partly those are the services.
Just hold it right there. Hold it right there. We'll continue just now. We need to pay our bills. We need to take a break. Please stay tuned. Don't go away. Welcome back to Initiating Insight with Sibongile. If you've just joined us, we are sitting with Ms. Khanyisile Mathebula, and we are talking about disability. And before we went on a break, she was telling us about the services they render on this program. Ms. Khanye, you know, in the beginning, we spoke about the wording of disability itself. And we are saying that, or rather we are suggesting that perhaps it should change to differently abled people. And I remember right early in the program, we said then that means if we are all differently abled, you made an analogy about the IT person and the fact that they were blind, and they type faster than you. So we agreed then on that premise that we are all differently abled people as long as we are human beings. However, I see that as we continue this conversation, we do not stop using the word disability. You mentioned something about disabled people who are saying you cannot do something for us without us. And for me, that already suggests that they are suggesting that they are a special group of people. Can we really, really move away from that perception?
We can't really move away from that perception because this sector, people with disabilities, it is true that they have special needs. Therefore, there will be special programs, you know, for them. But what we want to emphasize is that they should be integrated in all what we do, be it in families. I emphasize the family because that is where our people, you know, are being raised in. Participate, spends most of their time with families. So we can't then say they do not have those special needs. Yes, they do have. They do not. They do have the special needs. However, we want to emphasize that in whatever that is being planned, in whatever that is being done, they want to be involved. That is why that slogan, nothing about us without us, because they know what their needs are. They are the best people that can inform government, that can inform their family that my need is as follows. So we shouldn't plan, you know, for them. That is why I emphasize that as government, as the Department of Social Development, when we plan whatever services they are, you know, involved, services that will affect them, they are involved. In fact, we are also encouraging other departments as well, not only the Department of Social Development, because we do not work alone. We work with other departments to ensure that when they plan anything, they integrate, you know, people with disabilities. For instance, even when it comes to issues of houses, they should also be considered because they are part and parcel of our families. They also need houses. They are just like you and me. Because the challenge is that we find that we discriminate and forget about them, whereas they are also part of us.
Yes, I suppose labor as well would be one of those departments.
Yes. Department of Health, Department of Transport, they would come and say, recently we were at the legislature, they indicated that transport should be accessible. The taxis, public transport, buses should be accessible to them as well, because they are part of the society, they are part of the communities.
So there shouldn't be anything that isolates them. In other words, there shouldn't be programs that say, okay, these are four. They need to be integrated so that...
Yes, because there's a tendency.
So we should see them in taxi ranks.
Yes,
we should, in the same taxi that I would board, they should be able to board the same taxi.
Yes, they should be accommodated, because some of them are saying you are on a wheelchair, and when you have to board a taxi, you are told there's no space for the wheelchair.
Yeah.
It means as the transport, you know, community, we are not providing for people with disabilities.
Are we being realistic though? I mean, you look at a 16-seater and you have to accommodate a wheelchair. Where will you then accommodate? Unless if you're saying you need to then rebuild.
Can I share my experience?
Please. That's why you're here, please.
In Japan, we went to Japan, but also in the country, and also here in Gauteng, there are taxis that are accessible to people with disabilities. There is provision. There is something that they just lift it up, put the wheelchair, and then the person gets into the
So we do have
Mzansi. Yes, but it's very few. What they are actually challenging the taxis to do is to ensure that such taxis are also available for them. Even the buses, we can provide.
What sort of programs do you host to make sure that education goes around communities, goes through filters communities, and people get to understand how to behave around disabled people?
On an annual basis, I indicated that we host the education and awareness, events. It's mainly to
Where do you host them?
In different communities.
Okay.
And what we do, mostly we target the national days. We've got an epilepsy week in June. We have November as the disability month, where we go into full swing right from the beginning of November up to the 3rd of December, which is the International Day of People with Disabilities. But this is ongoing. It doesn't happen only in November. Remember, I indicated that there are different disabilities. There's epilepsy, there's albinism, there's also people who are deaf, people who are blind. There's also the Mental Health Day in October, a number of disabilities. But during those days, we then organize as a department, working together with the NPOs that specialize in those programs. We then organize the awareness campaigns in different communities. It can be on a small scale, but I think we are getting there. And like I'm saying, the emphasis is not only
hold it right there. We pay bills in this house, Ness, so we need to do that. Please stay tuned, don't go away. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Initiating Insight with Sibongile, and today we're talking about disability, and we are still joined by Ms. Khanyisile Mathebula from the Department of Social Development as a Director of Special Needs and Families. And before we went on a break, she was telling us about the events, or rather the programs they render to service this sector. Ms. Mathebula, you told us about these events. So when you host these events, how does the government ensure the accommodation of the sector?
What we always do when we organize these events, we firstly ensure that in the planning task team, people with disabilities are involved, so that they're able to guide us as to how the program should unfold on that day. That's the first thing. I'll still go back to the slogan, nothing about us without them.
Yeah.
And when we choose a venue, when we have to decide on any venue, it should be a venue that will be accessible and accommodate people with disabilities. We can't have a venue where you find maybe there are steps, no lifts, and you would find that there are people with physical disabilities who cannot get into the venue. I think that is the very important thing when we plan with them. Secondly, we have to ensure if there are people who are deaf, we always ensure that there's a sign language interpreter. And I would like to emphasize the fact that as government, as a department, we should lead by example, because if we can invite people who are deaf, they won't be able to hear. They won't be able to follow the program. We always also try to ensure that if they are blind people, we try and ensure there are organizations who can do Braille. We have a facility, a residential facility with people who can do a program, convert a program into Braille.
Okay.
Because in the past, they used to be very unhappy with us.
So I imagine you would have an event that will accommodate somebody who would need a ramp, some Braille and a sign language. And sure, okay,
you have
in
to,
one program.
Yes, you have to ensure, like if it's the International Day of People with Disabilities, if it's a program that is happening during November and it involves, all of them, you have to ensure that all those are in place to ensure that you accommodate them. Otherwise, they won't be able to be, part of the program. We also ensure that when we provide and procure transport, to some extent, I'm not saying we're 100%, we ensure that accessible transport is provided, because we do provide transport for them to attend the events. We've got organizations, those NPOs. As a Department of Social Development, some of them we've been able to assist them to purchase, accessible vehicles. Sometimes they would then bring those people with accessible vehicles. But also, the other issue with people with disabilities is the participation in the economy, in the mainstream economy. So there are a number of programs that are offered by the government. But I would like to mention that as the Department of Social Development, with the events that we organize, in some of the services that are provided, we've got companies of people with disabilities that provide those services. I wouldn't say it is 100%, but I think we are getting there. And
so they provide these services to everybody?
Yes. For instance, if we need the PA system, there are companies for people with disabilities who provide, such a service. So we ensure that we really go an extra mile to look for those companies who can provide, such services. And we are doing it because there has been, we work very closely with the sector. So we know what are the challenges. So we are trying, our level best.
Tell us some of these threats that you would encounter that make your work very difficult.
I would like to mention one. Recently, there was a child who is autistic, who is said reportedly neglected, and in a way, for us as social workers, abused, because I am told that child was tied to a tree in Orange Farm. So we would find that we have, such cases where people with disabilities are neglected by their own families, are abused by their own families. And that is where we come in as the Department of Social Development to investigate the circumstances, to work together with the family, because we always say that people with disabilities must remain with their families. We do not want those people to be removed from their families to residential facilities where now they are isolated. But I said in really extreme cases, then we have such people in such, facilities. So we do offer counseling, referral to the relevant resources. So abuse and neglect is one issue that is a challenge to us. Also, the one that I keep on, going back to the discrimination, people with disabilities, they are discriminated in their own communities, We never think about them. Whenever we're doing something, we don't think about them. We are working on that a challenge that is being faced by them. That is why, as a department, as government, we also ensure that in whatever programs that we try our level best, that if people with disabilities are involved and if they are going to be affected, they should be part, and parcel. So mainly that is the challenge. And people where our offices are, we've got the offices of the Department of Social Development that provide the services. If they happen to know about a person that is neglected or abused or needs a service, we have regional offices in the 5 regions. We also have the NPOs that we are working with.
Ms. Khanyisile, thank you so much for your time. And you've just wrapped up the show for us. That's all the time we had for today. Until next time, please take care. And remember that we are all special abled and we need to take care of one another.